My name is Natalie Galvin, and I'm 28 years old. If you'd met me a year ago, you would have thought I had everything figured out. Steady job, quiet apartment, a relationship that looked perfect on paper. I thought so too, until the night I realized how blind I'd been. Ethan and I met 3 years earlier at a tech conference in the city. He was all bright smiles and messy energy, the kind of person who filled every room he walked into. I was the opposite, measured, methodical, a software engineer who preferred structure to chaos. Somehow we balanced each other. Or at least that's what I believed. Back then, I used to admire how passionate he was about marketing and new ideas. He talked big about starting his own creative agency one day. I liked his drive. I liked him. I believed in him so much that when his company downsized and he lost his job, I didn't even hesitate. I covered our rent for 4 months while he looked for work. I cooked, cleaned, encouraged him through endless interviews, even rewrote his resume at midnight with tired eyes and cold coffee. I kept telling myself love was about teamwork. Then came the first mention of Lila, his ex. She's kind of a free spirit, he said one night, laughing over an old photo she'd texted him. We were toxic, but fun. I remember the word toxic lingering in my mind. He said it like a compliment. At the time, I brushed it off. Everyone had history, right? Lila was part of his past, and I was his present. At least that's what I told myself. 6 months later, I got offered a position most engineers would kill for, a relocation package to lead a project in Europe. It was the kind of opportunity that could change a career forever. When I told Ethan, his reaction wasn't excitement. His face fell. Long distance, Nat, you know how that ends. Lila tried it with her ex. Before me, it ruined them. I can't go through that again. He said it like the word Europe was a threat. So I did something I still regret. I declined the offer. I told myself I was choosing love, choosing us. But looking back, it was the first time I chose fear over growth. For a while, things went back to normal. We had our routines, weekend hikes, late night takeout, Netflix marathons that blurred one month into the next. I thought peace had returned. But cracks always find their way through comfort. It started small. Ethan would mention Lila in passing. She just got back from Bali, or she posted this hilarious meme today. Then came the late night texts. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. to the soft buzz of his phone lighting up our bedroom. He'd glance at me, half asleep, and mumble, "Just catching up with Lila. She can't sleep either." Each time my stomach twisted a little tighter. One night, curiosity overpowered restraint. I looked at his screen when he left it face up on the counter. The message said, "Miss our adventures." My chest went cold. That single winking emoji told me everything I needed to know and everything I didn't want to believe. The next morning, I tried to handle it like an adult. No shouting, no accusations. I poured us both coffee and said quietly, "Ethan, those texts from Lila, they make me uncomfortable. If we're serious, maybe it's time to set some boundaries, like blocking her." He stared at me like I'd said something absurd. Then he laughed. "You can't expect me to block my ex. We're still friends." He said it with that smug little half smile he used when he thought he was being rational and I was being emotional. "It's not a big deal," he continued, setting down his mug hard enough to make it clink. "Lila and I have history, sure, but it's platonic now. You're acting insecure, Nat. If you trusted me, this wouldn't even be an issue." I remember sitting there, staring at my reflection in the dark swirl of coffee, the steam fading between us. It wasn't the words that hurt most, it was the tone. Dismissive, like my feelings were an inconvenience he'd outgrown. "Friends," I repeated softly, keeping my voice even. He nodded, smugly satisfied that he'd won whatever debate he thought this was. I smiled faintly and said, "Then be friends." He blinked, confused. Maybe he expected me to cry or fight, but I didn't. Instead, I rinsed my cup, grabbed my bag, and left for work. That was the moment something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you realize the person you've been fighting for stopped fighting for you a long time ago. At my desk, while lines of code scrolled across the screen, I thought about all the choices I'd made for him, the missed promotion, the rent I paid, the nights I stayed awake cheering him up. I thought about how easily he had brushed it all off with the word insecure. By lunch, the decision was made. There would be no screaming breakup, no emotional implosion, just silence, the kind that shakes the foundation of someone's pride. That night, Ethan was on the couch, laughing at something on his phone, probably another meme from her. I sat beside him, pretending to scroll too. But what I was actually doing was deleting every photo, every post, every trace of us online. The laughter from his phone blurred into static in my ears as I clicked remove tag delete, album archive memories. By the time he looked up, I was smiling faintly again. He didn't notice the subtle difference. He never did. Later, as he fell asleep, I opened my work email. The subject line from my boss still sat there. Promotion still available if you reconsider. My fingers hovered over the keyboard only a second before I typed, I accept, I'm ready to relocate. When I hit send, I felt something like freedom for the first time in years. The next morning, the sun came through the blinds and Ethan was already awake, scrolling on his phone. Hey, weird question, he said. Why did you delete all our photos on Instagram? I shrugged, sipping my coffee. Just felt like a fresh start. He frowned. Are you mad at me? I smiled again, this time genuine. Not at all. He didn't know what that meant. He wouldn't not until later. By evening, when he texted me, why are you ignoring me? I was already packing my suitcase. When the zipper closed, I took one last look around the apartment we'd built together, the plant he'd forgotten to water, the photo frames now face down on the shelf, the couch where we used to talk until sunrise. Then I snapped a picture of my boarding pass and sent it to him. No caption, no explanation, just proof that I was leaving. By the time he saw it, my phone was already on airplane mode. And for the first time, so was my heart. I didn't cry on the flight. Not once. Not when the plane lifted through the clouds. Not when the city I'd lived in for years shrank beneath me like a bad memory. I thought I'd feel heartbreak, but what I felt was relief, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. When I landed in Prague, the air felt different, crisper, cleaner, untouched by everything I'd been suffocating in. My boss had arranged temporary housing near the company's European branch. The apartment was small, but full of light, with tall windows that opened to a narrow street of cobblestones and morning chatter. I dropped my suitcase, sat on the bare wooden floor, and laughed. Not because it was funny, but because freedom felt absurdly foreign. For the first few days, I lived like a ghost. I went to work, learned everyone's names, smiled at small talk. But at night, I lay awake, replaying every conversation I'd had with Ethan. Nat, you're overreacting. It's just friendship. If you trusted me... Those phrases looped in my head like broken code until eventually I started to debug them in my mind, question by question, excuse by excuse. By the end of week 1, the grief turned into analysis. And by week 2, analysis turned into purpose. On the second Friday after work, I sat in a cafe that overlooked the river. I opened my phone for the first time in days. Hundreds of notifications, missed calls, voicemails, texts. Ethan. What's going on, Ethan? Why are you doing this, Ethan? You can't just walk away. Then the last one, Ethan. You're seriously leaving the country over what, Lila? I didn't reply. Instead, I archived the entire thread, changed my number, and blocked him everywhere. My life wasn't a group project anymore. I didn't owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. But karma, I learned, doesn't rush, it waits. At work, I threw myself into projects. The new office was everything my old one wasn't: diverse, dynamic, demanding. I led a small engineering team on an AI system that detected fraud patterns in financial data. My manager was a straightforward Czech woman named Clara, who spoke 5 languages and never wasted words. When she congratulated me on a flawless presentation, it felt like a small victory I could actually claim for myself. One evening as we packed up, she asked, "You came alone, right? No partner waiting." I smiled faintly. Not anymore. She nodded with understanding that didn't need translation. Then you'll do well here. Freedom suits you. The following weekend, I explored the city. I walked across Charles Bridge at dawn when the statues glowed bronze in the early light and street musicians were just setting up. I watched the river flow beneath and thought about how people always chase the illusion of permanence in love. But maybe love isn't supposed to last forever. Maybe it's supposed to teach you how to choose yourself when it doesn't. Back at the apartment, I made a small ritual. Every morning before work, I'd stand by the window, sip coffee, and write down one thing I refused to carry anymore. Guilt, fear. The habit of explaining myself to people who never listened. By the end of the first month, I'd filled an entire notebook. Still, memories had a way of sneaking in. Sometimes, when my phone buzzed with a new message, I'd half expect to see his name again. But it was never Ethan, and that was the best part. Around that time, one of my teammates invited me to a group dinner. That's when I met Adam. He wasn't like Ethan, no grand gestures or loud charisma. Adam was quiet confidence, the kind of man who listened before speaking. A graphic designer with a dry sense of humor and eyes that actually paid attention. During dinner, while everyone debated which Czech beer was best, he asked me, "You've been here a while, but you don't sound like you've adjusted yet. You still measure everything in miles, not kilometers." I laughed softly. Old habits. I'm still learning what home means. He tilted his head. Sometimes it's just a feeling, not a place. That sentence stuck with me for weeks. Back in my apartment that night, I scrolled through social media for the first time since leaving home. Ethan's profile still existed, still public, still curated. His latest post was a photo of him and Lila at a rooftop bar. Her arm around him captioned, "Nothing beats old friends who truly get you." Hundreds of likes. A pang of irritation flickered, but it didn't hurt, not the way it once would have. If anything, I almost pitied him. He still needed an audience. I'd stopped needing witnesses. As weeks turned into months, silence became my favorite sound. Everywhere I went, the tram rides, the grocery lines, the quiet cafes, I caught glimpses of who I used to be. The woman who apologized too easily, forgave too quickly, and believed love meant endurance. Now I saw it differently. Endurance without respect isn't love, it's self-erasure. By the end of my third month abroad, the promotion that once felt terrifying now felt earned. My name started circulating in company emails as the woman who saved the project. Colleagues sought my advice. My new life had structure, stability, and peace, everything Ethan once called boring. Then one night, just as I was about to fall asleep, my phone buzzed with an email notification from an address I didn't recognize. Subject: "Please read this." The message began, "Hey Nat, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Things haven't been great lately. I really miss what we had. Lila's been complicated. I should have listened to you." I stared at the screen for a long minute. The irony was poetic. He'd finally used the word complicated for the woman he once defended so fiercely. Without replying, I clicked archive. Then I shut off my phone and turned to the window. Outside, the city glowed softly under the street lamps. Somewhere distant music floated up from the riverfront. I smiled, whispering to myself, "You said she was just a friend. I said be friends. Looks like you got exactly what you wanted." Then I closed the curtains and went to sleep, finally unbothered, finally free. By the time spring arrived, Prague had stopped feeling like an escape and started feeling like a home. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and rain, and the tram bells outside my apartment became a kind of music. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up anxious about someone else's moods. I woke up to my own. My days followed a rhythm now. Early morning coffee by the window, coding sprints with my team, lunch by the river with Clara, my blunt but oddly affectionate boss. She teased me once. "You're always working, Natalie. You need a hobby before your computer becomes your boyfriend." I smiled. "Maybe I'll get a real one someday." She laughed. "A real boyfriend or a real hobby?" "Maybe both," I said, half joking. It was strange how healing didn't come in waves. It came in micro moments. The first time I laughed without remembering Ethan. The first time I cooked dinner just for me, not for us. The first time I realized that silence in the apartment didn't mean loneliness, it meant peace. One Saturday, I joined a small expat group for a weekend hike just outside the city. That's where I ran into Adam again, the designer I'd met at the team dinner months ago. He was carrying an old film camera, wearing the kind of smile that made you forget time zones. He caught up beside me on the trail. "You're the software engineer who never takes breaks, right? And you're the guy who still uses a camera older than both of us," I teased. He grinned. "Some things are worth keeping old school." We talked the whole hike about everything from our favorite cities to how strange it feels to start over somewhere new. There was no flirting, just an easy rhythm that reminded me what connection was supposed to feel like. When the group stopped at a lookout point, Adam pointed his camera toward the horizon. "Smile," he said. I hesitated. "I don't really—" "Not for me," he interrupted gently. "For yourself." He clicked the shutter. The wind caught my hair, and for a brief second I felt like I existed outside of anyone's story but my own. That night, as I uploaded the day's photos to my phone, I noticed how different I looked, lighter. Somehow eyes unburdened. I thought back to the woman who once stayed up until 3 a.m., rewriting someone else's resume, while her own dreams sat unopened in her inbox. That woman felt like a ghost from another life. Still, ghosts like to visit. Every now and then, someone from back home would message me, "Hey, heard you moved abroad. Ethan's been not great," or He's been posting weird stuff about breakups. Are you two okay? I never replied. I didn't need to. But curiosity, it's a stubborn thing. One evening, after a long day at work, I caved and looked at his profile again. The difference was startling. Gone was the polished, confident Ethan I remembered. He'd gone from gym selfies and cocktail bars to blurry photos with cryptic captions like, "Some people only love you when you're useful." The comments section was filled with sympathy emojis from mutual friends, but I could read between the lines. He was unraveling. And then there she was, Lila, tagging him in photos, posting vague quotes about fake people. In one post, she wrote, "He promised stability but couldn't even manage honesty." The irony almost made me laugh. I shut my laptop and whispered, "Karma doesn't miss." A week later, Clara pulled me into her office. "You've done well here," she said, handing me a folder. Inside was an offer for a permanent role plus a raise. "I want you to lead the next AI project. You've earned it." Something in me stilled. I remembered the night I'd turned down that first European offer because Ethan said long distance would ruin us. Now here I was, thriving without him, offered the exact kind of life I once sacrificed. "Thank you," I said softly. "I won't waste it." That evening, the office held a small celebration. Champagne laughter, a playlist full of bad 90s hits. Adam was there too, leaning casually against the counter, watching me toast with the team. When the music softened, he walked over. "So the promotion girl gets promoted again," he said, smiling. "You planning to celebrate?" "Maybe," I said, "if I can find someone who doesn't mind my terrible dancing." He laughed. "I'm not great either, but I'm brave." He extended a hand. "Come on, Natalie, just one song." So we danced badly joyfully. No romance, not yet. Just a reminder that life could be fun again. But peace, I've learned, doesn't erase the past. It only quiets it until something knocks again. That knock came 2 nights later. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. For a second, I almost ignored it, but the country code, my old one, made me freeze. I answered. "Natalie." It was Tom, one of our mutual friends. "Hey, sorry to call out of nowhere," he said awkwardly. Ethan's not doing great." I stayed silent. He's been posting about Lila. Apparently she left him. Took some money, too. It's kind of a mess." A pause. Then softly, "He keeps saying he should have appreciated you more." I stared out the window. The city below sparkled alive. My reflection stared back, steady, composed. "I hope he learns from it," I said finally. "But that's not my story anymore." Tom exhaled, relieved, maybe a little ashamed. "You sound different." "I am," I replied and hung up. That night, I went for a walk along the river. The air was cool, the streetlights shimmering across the water like scattered glass. I thought about everything I'd endured, the manipulation disguised as love, the way Ethan once said I was too predictable. Maybe stability isn't boring. Maybe it's the bravest thing a person can choose. I stopped at the bridge, closed my eyes, and whispered into the wind. "You were right about one thing, Ethan. Long distance does change people." Then I smiled to myself. It just didn't ruin me. Summer came quietly that year, warm and golden over the city. I'd been abroad for nearly 9 months, and by then, the rhythm of my new life had taken hold completely. The past felt like an old film, grainy, distant, playing in another language I no longer spoke. Work was thriving. I had been promoted officially to project lead, mentoring younger developers and collaborating across countries. My team was my small family now, diverse, chaotic, loyal. We worked hard, laughed harder. I even found myself smiling on Monday morning, something I once thought impossible. But peace doesn't mean the past disappears. Sometimes karma just takes its time to circle back. It was late on a Thursday when I got a message from Emily, one of our mutual friends from back home. We hadn't spoken since before I left. "Hey Nat, sorry for the random text, but have you seen Ethan's posts lately? You might want to." I ignored it at first. Old curiosity is dangerous. But hours later, as I sat in my quiet apartment, I gave in and searched his profile. The man on my screen barely resembled the Ethan I'd once loved. His usually perfect smile looked forced. He'd gone from posting photos of fancy dinners and weekend trips to vague rants about betrayal. Some people pretend to care just to watch you fall. Be careful who you trust. Even loyalty has an expiration date. Scrolling further, I saw her Lila tagged in older posts, smiling beside him at some rooftop bar. Her captions dripping with irony. "Love that feels like adventure. Hashtag real connections." But then the tone shifted. Her next few posts were cryptic. Never loan money to a man who confuses chaos for passion. Turns out being fun doesn't pay rent. And then suddenly nothing. Both of their accounts went quiet. I should have stopped there, but something in me, call it closure, call it curiosity, needed the rest of the story. So I messaged Emily back. Okay, I looked. What happened? She replied almost instantly. Apparently, Lila drained his savings. He lent her money for some travel project, and she vanished. Rumor is she cheated on him with some guy she met online. He's a mess, Nat. Quit his job, moved back in with his parents. Everyone's talking about it. I didn't respond right away. I just stared at her message, feeling a strange mix of emotions, sadness, vindication, disbelief, pity. The irony was brutal. He'd once told me I was too predictable, that Lila understood the fun side of him. Now he was living the very instability he'd claimed to avoid. But I didn't gloat. That wasn't my style anymore. I simply whispered to the quiet room, "You wanted freedom, Ethan. Hope it was worth it." Weeks later, I ran into Adam again at a local art gallery. He'd just finished designing a campaign for a travel brand and was showcasing his work. The gallery was filled with soft music, warm light, and people sipping wine while pretending to understand abstract art. He spotted me near one of his prints, a photograph of the city skyline during sunset. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, smiling. "I told you I'd find a hobby," I replied. "Apparently it's pretending I understand photography." He laughed. "You don't have to understand it, just feel it." Then quieter. "You look peaceful, happier than last time." I hesitated, then nodded. "I am. Maybe for the first time in a long while." He handed me a glass of wine, and we stood there in comfortable silence. There was no rush, no pressure, just presence. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's the quiet ease of realizing someone finally sees you, not the version you perform. One rainy Sunday morning, I got an unexpected email. Subject from Ethan. My first instinct was to delete it, but curiosity won again. I opened it. "Hey, Nat, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I see now how much I hurt you. I thought I was chasing excitement, but it turns out stability was what I needed all along. I hope you're doing okay. I still think about you sometimes." I read it twice, then a third time. The words should have made me angry, or at least nostalgic. Instead, they made me feel nothing. That's when I realized forgiveness isn't something you give to the other person. It's something you give yourself when they no longer have the power to affect your heartbeat. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I went out for a walk. The rain had softened into a drizzle, and the cobblestones shimmered under the streetlights. I passed by a small bookstore, its windows fogged from warmth inside. On impulse, I stepped in. A jazz record was playing low and slow. The woman behind the counter smiled. "Looking for something special? Just something honest," I said. I left with a poetry book about rebirth and resilience. On the first page, the author had written, "Some storms come to clear your sky, not drown you." That night, I copied that line into my notebook, the one I used to write what I'd let go of. Next to it, I added one more word, Ethan. From then on, the messages from home started to fade. Emily stopped mentioning him. Tom stopped trying to mediate. It was as if the world had collectively decided to let the story end. Adam and I grew closer slowly, naturally. He never asked about my past in detail. He just made space for it without demanding explanation. One evening, as we watched the city lights flicker from his rooftop, he asked, "What made you stay here instead of going back?" I thought for a moment before answering. "Because leaving wasn't the escape," I said. "It was the beginning." He smiled softly. "Then I'm glad you began here." For once I believed him. Not as a line, not as a promise, just as truth. But life, of course, loves its symmetry. Just when I thought the chapter was finally closed, the past knocked one last time, loud and desperate. It was past midnight when my phone rang with another unfamiliar number, the country code again home. Against my better judgment, I answered. A shaky voice said, "Nat, it's Ethan." I froze. He sounded different. Deflated, hollow. "I'm sorry to call like this," he continued, voice cracking. I needed someone to talk to. Everything's gone. Lila took the rest of my savings, blocked me everywhere. I have nothing left. You were the only person who ever actually cared about me." For a long moment, I said nothing. Just listened to the rain outside. Then I said quietly, "Ethan, you made your choice. And I made mine." He sniffled. "Can't we start over?" "Please, I'll change. I'll make it right this time." I exhaled slowly. "You said blocking Lila would be controlling. But you blocked me when I left. You called me predictable. Now you want the peace you once mocked. I hope you find it, but it won't be with me." Before he could answer, I ended the call. Then I blocked the number. As I stood by the window, I watched the reflection of the rain streaking down the glass and realized something powerful. I hadn't just moved cities. I'd moved on. I thought that phone call would be the last echo of my past. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, just as the city was sliding into autumn, the ghost started knocking again, this time louder, uglier, and far more desperate. It started with an email from unknown@somebusinessdomain.com. Subject, please, Natalie. Just hear me out. The message began simply, "I know you probably hate me, but I don't know who else to reach out to. Lila left me broke. I've been trying to fix things, but nothing's working. You always believed in me. Please, can we just talk?" I hovered over the trash icon, but something stopped me. Not sympathy, curiosity. It was astonishing how he still managed to twist the story into him being the victim. I didn't reply. 5 hours later, another message appeared. Then another. Each one messier, more emotional, more erratic. By the third email, he was practically begging. "I've lost everything. I just need someone to listen. Please, I'll make it right this time, I swear." That night, I dreamt about the old apartment, the smell of his cologne, the muted light on the walls, his phone buzzing at 2 a.m. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, realizing that even from a continent away, some people will still try to haunt you if you let them. A few nights later, I was working late, lost in code, when my phone lit up again. Unknown number, local time, 2:07 a.m. I shouldn't have answered, but the part of me that wanted final closure did. "Hello." For a second, all I heard was breathing. Then his voice fragile and slurred. "Nat, it's me." I closed my eyes. "Ethan, it's 2 a.m. I know, he mumbled. I needed to hear your voice. I'm sorry. God, I was so stupid. I shouldn't have. I thought she was different." There was a pause, long and heavy. The sound of him crying came through the line. "She hit me once," he said suddenly. "Threw a glass, took my card, drained my account. I deserved it, didn't I? For everything I did to you." For a moment, my chest tightened. Not out of love, but from the sheer weight of how broken he sounded. Then just as quickly, I remembered the night he'd smirked and said, "You can't expect me to block my ex. We're just friends." That memory sobered any trace of pity. "You don't deserve abuse, Ethan," I said calmly. "But you do need to face what you created. I can't save you. I'm not asking you to save me," he pleaded. "I just miss you. We were good together." "No," I replied. "I was good to you. You were careless with that." He went silent, then whispered, "You really hate me, don't you?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No, Ethan, I don't hate you. I just don't care anymore." And with that, I hung up. The next day, my phone was full of missed calls and voicemails. Some were from him, some from unfamiliar numbers that turned out to be mutual friends. "Tom. He's in bad shape, Nat. Maybe just talk to him once, Emily. You're being cold. He's trying. You were the stable one. Help him get back on his feet." Even his sister texted me. "Ethan's falling apart. He says he can't eat. You're the only one who ever understood him. Please just call." It was surreal how everyone still expected the woman who'd been abandoned to come back as a savior. That was the story they all loved, the patient, forgiving woman fixing the man who broke her. But I wasn't that woman anymore, so I did the only thing that truly terrified them. I stayed silent. Days turned into weeks, and his attempts grew darker. A text popped up one afternoon while I was in a meeting. "I saw your photo with that guy, so you just moved on like that. Guess I never mattered." Then another an hour later. "I hope he knows he's just the rebound." Then one more right before midnight. "You'll regret this." I didn't even flinch. Instead, I blocked his number again, reported the email address, and changed my contact info at work. The version of me who used to explain and justify was gone. I wasn't a chapter in his redemption arc. Still, karma isn't done until it balances everything. A few weeks later, Emily messaged again, but this time her tone was different. "You probably don't care, but Ethan's been arrested. Something about unpaid loans. Apparently, Lila used his name on some documents before she disappeared. He's been trying to track her down, but no one's seen her." I read it twice, then slowly set my phone down. There was no satisfaction, no thrill of revenge. Just a quiet truth: when you play with fire long enough, you eventually burn alone. That night, I stood by my window and watched the lights shimmer over the river. Below the world went on lovers holding hands, music from a nearby cafe, laughter echoing between buildings. Life didn't pause for other people's chaos. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it slightly, whispering into the night, to peace that doesn't need an apology. The next morning, I met Adam for brunch. He noticed the faint circles under my eyes. Rough night, I smiled. Not anymore. He studied me for a moment, then said quietly, "Whoever hurt you must regret it now." I looked at him, sunlight spilling across his face. Maybe, but regret's not my business anymore. He nodded, understanding without pushing. "You're stronger than you think, Natalie." Maybe I said, smiling faintly, or maybe I finally learned the right kind of silence. That evening, when I got home, I went through my old photos, the ones I'd kept hidden on a hard drive I never opened. There was one of Ethan and me smiling on some long-forgotten vacation, his arm around me, both of us sunburned and naive. I stared at it for a moment, then hit delete for the final time. It didn't hurt. It didn't even sting. It just felt like closing a window that had been letting in cold air for too long. 3 months later, I found out through a mutual acquaintance that Ethan had moved to another city, living quietly off social media, trying to rebuild. I wished him well, silently, privately, like a prayer you no longer need answered. Because that's what healing really is, not forgiveness, not revenge, just distance with peace. By the time winter came around, everything about my life felt different. Lighter, clearer, quieter, in the best way possible. I'd moved into a new apartment overlooking the river, one with wide glass doors that let the morning sun pour in. On weekends, I baked bread or went hiking with Adam. We weren't rushing anything. We didn't need to. Peace had a rhythm now, and I'd learned how to live in its tempo. One evening in December, as I was making tea, a notification pinged on my laptop, Lisa's wedding. Zoom link reminder. Lisa had been one of the few mutual friends who'd stayed neutral through all the drama. I hadn't seen her in person since before I left, but she'd always checked in quietly, respectfully. Of course I planned to attend. The next night, I dressed simply: white sweater, gold earrings, hair down. Nothing dramatic, just me. I logged into the call early. There were familiar faces in the grid of boxes: Emily, Tom, some old coworkers. And then my breath caught. Ethan. He was there. His camera flickered on, revealing a man I barely recognized. Gaunt, pale, with unshaven stubble and hollow eyes. The background behind him looked cluttered, dim light clothes piled on a couch, empty bottles in view. For a split second, our eyes met through the screens. He froze. I could see at that moment of shocked disbelief, maybe even regret. But I didn't flinch. I smiled politely, like one does at an old colleague, then turned my camera slightly so that Adam, sitting across the table preparing dinner, was visible in the background. He caught my glance and winked softly before returning to chopping vegetables. The message was clear: my life had moved on, and it was good. The ceremony began. Music played softly through tinny laptop speakers, and everyone clapped as Lisa appeared in her gown. She looked radiant. The whole moment was filled with joy and small laughter. I let myself enjoy it, the simplicity, the sincerity. It was beautiful. Until my phone buzzed with a private message. "Ethan, can we talk, please? Just 1 minute." My pulse stayed steady. I ignored it. A few moments later, another ping. "Ethan, you owe me at least that." Owe him. That word "owe" hit me like a flashback. I remembered all the nights I'd comforted him after failures, all the sacrifices I'd made while he needed space. The irony was almost poetic. I exhaled slowly and typed one sentence. "You had 3 years to talk. I listened then. Not anymore." I hit enter and turned my camera off for a second just to breathe. But it didn't end there. Minutes later, Lisa's voice filled the call. "Before we end, if anyone wants to give a small message to the bride and groom." And before I could react, Ethan unmuted himself. "I just want to say," he started, voice trembling, "seeing everyone happy tonight makes me realize how much I've messed up. Some of us hurt people who actually cared about us, and we don't realize it until it's too late." The air in the chat went awkwardly still. A few people shifted in their seats. Then he added, looking directly into his camera, "Some people deserve better from me, and I hope they're happy now, even if it's not with me." His voice cracked on the last word. I stayed silent, staring at my screen. Not angry, not emotional, just detached. When he finally muted Lisa, bless her, smiled gently and said, "Thank you, Ethan," before moving on quickly. After the ceremony ended, I lingered a bit in the virtual after party. People were chatting, toasting, laughing. Then another notification popped up, private breakout room invite from Ethan. For a second, I considered ignoring it. But a part of me wanted true closure, not the half-healed version, not the polite avoidance. The kind where you look a ghost in the eye and it finally stops haunting you. So I clicked join. His face filled the screen. Up close, he looked exhausted. "Natalie," he said quietly, "please don't leave." I didn't answer. He rubbed his face. "I don't even know where to start. Lila ruined me. She stole from me, humiliated me, disappeared. Everything fell apart. I lost my job, my apartment. I'm living with my parents again." He gave a weak laugh that turned bitter. "You must be loving this." I tilted my head. "No, Ethan. I don't love watching anyone suffer, but I'm also not responsible for cleaning up the mess they created." He leaned forward, eyes red. "You don't understand. You were the only one who ever cared. You were steady, kind, real. I just didn't see it. Please, can we start over? I'll move there if I have to. I'll do anything." For a moment, the silence stretched between us like a test. The old Natalie, the one who used to fix, to comfort, to rationalize, might have softened. But that woman didn't live here anymore. "Ethan," I said gently but firmly, "you once told me I was predictable, that I made life too safe, too boring. You wanted excitement. You got it. And now you're calling the piece you left love. But love isn't a place you return to when everything else collapses. It's what you protect while it's still standing." His lip trembled. "You're really with someone else now, aren't you?" "Yes," I said simply, "and he doesn't need fixing." He stared at me for a long moment, something desperate flickering behind his eyes. "I'll change, Nat. Just give me a chance." "No," I replied softly. "You had all your chances. This isn't cruelty, it's clarity." He looked down defeated. "You're colder than I remember." I shook my head. "No, just healed." Before he could answer, I clicked leave room. When I rejoined the main call, Lisa was thanking everyone. Adam walked into frame with 2 glasses of wine. "How was it?" he asked, noticing my calm expression. "Closure," I said. "Nothing more." He handed me a glass. "To closure, then." We clinked lightly, and I smiled, not triumphantly, just peacefully. Later that night, after the call ended and the city went quiet, I stood by my balcony. The air was crisp stars reflecting in the river below. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed, the girl who stayed, the woman who left the one, who learned how to be alone, and the one who finally found peace again. Ethan's words echoed faintly in my mind. "You're colder than I remember." Maybe he was right, but maybe after everything, being cold just meant I'd finally stop burning myself to keep someone else warm. I took a deep breath, smiled into the night, and whispered, "You said you wanted freedom, Ethan. I found mine." And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted, I felt whole.